first one of these panels that I run, and I always get the most excited about the panels where we're just talking to hackers who happen to also be practitioners at organizations. So we're going to do self-intros down the row.
That sounds accurate. Hi everyone, so I'm Pete Yaworski. I'm an application security engineer at Shopify. Continue to be active in bug bounties between application security at Shopify, where I'm involved in our bug bounty program, our incident response, as well as code reviews internally.
I found a way to introduce mobile apps into the Android store that were malicious before the security checks were in place. I wrote a lot of research papers from that, and then they got recognized by the U.S. intelligence community, so I went out to DC and worked for 5 years doing that, and then jumped over to private industry, and that's where I really took off on bug bounties.
I have been hacking probably since high school, the guy that was showing the network. But I didn't actually do it bug bounty or anything like that until I was trying to reset my password on United.com, and something was just really sketchy with it. So I ended up just playing around with requests and ended up getting an account takeover. I had an ID, and basically from there I realized that I could actually do this stuff, and then joined HackerOne.
I'd always been interested in security, didn't kind of know where to go about it. So my formal education's in criminology and public administration, and I had a government job and absolutely just hated it. So I was bored out of my mind. And so I was doing online courses, and there was finally a security course. So I started trying to go find more information, and I came across the HackerOne Hacktivity. And that was kind of this gold mine of information where I just started walking through all of these vulnerabilities that were publicly disclosed. And then it just kind of quickly ramped up for me. I got in to make a couple extra bucks. And then it was just the art of the challenge, right? Could you make a developer look bad? It's still great to get bounties, but I think a lot of the excitement is when you first find that bug and you know that you've broken the system.
It's really fun. That's basically, I think of it like solving a puzzle. The thing is that you don't know there's a solution to it, so the entire time you're kind of just basically testing everything you could think of, and you get to be creative and try to, like Pete was saying, outsmart the actual developers. And I had done engineering for a while. That was what I did out of college. So I know how easy it is to slip up when you're coding something. And I know that, everybody has bugs when they're coding. It's impossible to write completely secure code. And then bounties are awesome. Like I said, I did it for a year full time. So what kept me hacking was I needed to pay rent.
Yeah, so for me, it's really a challenge. So I love to figure out new technology, right? New stuff's being introduced all the time. So bounty programs are a great way to do that because you've got all these awesome companies that are building new things, and then they invite you to come in and break them. So you get to learn how they built them and then figure out how to break them.
Yeah, I think something big is I like hacking products that I use. It already takes a lot of the work out of it because I know exactly how it works and how it's supposed to work. And basically from there, then you just start seeing what's actually happening behind the scenes. And then the bounty table is pretty important to me. I think if a company has a $750 critical bounty, that's clearly not worth it.
Yeah, so I like programs that have a really large scope, right? So whenever they wildcard domains and just pretty much say, hey, come in, see what you can find and see how far you can take it. Because I think that shows that they're really interested in working with researchers and really, truly passionate about finding security issues in their company if they're willing to give you that scope.
I do want to add one other thing, which is the time to bounty also, because nothing keeps the momentum going. Like when you submit something and within a couple of days you get a bounty. Yeah. The worst is if you submit something and then you don't hear back for 6 months, and then even if they pay a good bounty, you're like, well, I gotta wait that whole time again and get familiar again with the product. So
the first question that I get, or I usually pose, is kind of how have they viewed this or handled it internally, right? So is my assessment something that they share and agree with? Just so that I know what they prioritize and what they think is important for my next reports. Where should I focus within their application?
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I ask myself, what's the impact of it? And I realize that if I need to write a book on how to explain the impact of this, it's making some scenario, it a lot of times isn't the most impactful. I guess what can an attacker do with this? Does it require insanely unlikely user interaction where you just need to go to the site and then hit 15 buttons on a keyboard and then they'll send a spam email to somebody?
Yeah, it's really important that interaction back with the customer, right? Because they need to give you authority. If you find something, to keep going further, right? To see how far you can exploit it. but you could get into some really sensitive data. So you've got to make sure that that communication is good with them. And that's where it's really important to make sure that the bounty program and the communication is solid with them and that you're working with a good team.
Outside of the folks you run programs with, like just folks that you talk to outside of the space who hear that you're a hacker, hear that you do bug bounty programs, what are the misconceptions you run into right away?
Well, everybody thinks that you're reading a box like that. Whenever you find a vulnerability, like you have now owned the entire system, right? I don't think people necessarily comprehend like the spectrum of vulnerabilities and what the impact could be across them. The other thing is we're not all 400 pounds. That's a big misconception.
We're getting close.
I'm working on it, but
Anyone have experiences encountering something and just flat out not being able to contact the security team responsible? How often do you run into that?
Usually I'll find a way to contact them. I mean, if I feel like it's worth a report. If it's something that I see is technically incorrect but not great, I just won't report it. There was a time, actually like 2 weeks ago, where I was ordering a bunch of ski equipment online, and I was in like the checkout flow doing this thing, and I realized that you could actually dump out like a lot of customer data pretty easily. And obviously they had no bounty program, there was no security page or anything. So I popped open a live chat thing that is probably outsourced anyway, and I just like pasted the report in there. And they like kept breaking it up, so I sent like 10 messages to this poor chat person, and
how did this start?
they said thank you, we'll send to the engineering team, and then I tried to sell some services. I was like, if you guys want full benefits. But they never contacted me.
So I had something similar, actually. It was a little bit shadier than that, but so I found customer data too on a big site, right? And there was no way to report it. I couldn't find the security team, so I thought, okay, I'm going to just reach out to their customer service blindly and say, hey, I found this vulnerability. How do you want me to report it to your security team? I need their contact information. And the live chat person was like, oh, tell me all about it. Like, let me have the customer data. And I'm like, oh, this is not feeling right. So, and they couldn't provide that security information, so obviously they weren't going to just hand it off. So that's why it's really important to have the outlet, right? Have a security email alias on your company, and make sure that there's a good pathway for people to report. Even if you're not in a part where you can like pay your researchers, at least have like a VDP program so people can get stuff to you.
One of the unique perspectives I think all three of you have is both on the hunting side and the operator side. You all run security programs and interact with doppelganger versions of yourselves on the other side. What's that like? Any experiences to share there?
for us at Shopify, we're a public program, so that brings a lot of unique challenges. And we're a public program that has a minimum of $500, right? So that's one of the larger minimums on HackerOne. So we get a lot of attention to our program because of that, but unfortunately it's a lot of noise. So we try to work with hackers and try to teach hackers like how to kind of redirect them. And that's sometimes very painful, sometimes it's super easy. Like think of like at least a handful of hackers that started out making a ton of noise and then quickly turned around and provided a ton of value. But the value of having hackers on the application security team, like there's 3 or 4 of us that do bug bounties, some more than others. You can kind of empathize with what's going on the other side of the screen. And like to Tanner's point, and some of the points that have been brought up on the panel, we know how important it is to have quick communication. We know how important it is to be transparent, quick payouts. But then we also try to default to disclosure, both for our customers, but then also for hackers, to create like a repository of knowledge. So we can get hackers that are learning. We always respond to all of our comments from hackers, but sometimes it can be difficult. Other times it can be, like we had one hacker who made a ton of noise for us, and then he submitted a report that happened to be our highest bounty at the time. We paid out $20,000 because he was able to get access to any shop. And this was a person who made like a ton of noise for us, and then all of a sudden he submitted this report, and we just kind of were joking, like this can't be true. And then we validated it, and it was true. And we were like, oh, okay, this is a problem. So that kicked off a security incident internally.
Yeah, I mean, I try to, I guess, manage the program to make it into a program that I would want to participate in. I've been on the other side a lot longer than I've been on the management side, so I mean, I know, I guess, what the hacker wants to see. Some examples are, we had somebody who submitted something, it wasn't quite a bug, but it's a good find, just something interesting, you know? So kind of talking through it, helping them. I had dialogue going with them on Twitter just so he doesn't get discouraged, right? It's like we want him to continue acting on our program. I don't want to just close the report and just say, go screw yourself. It's like, I actually want to keep getting reports from him. And I think that's like, he really appreciated it, and I think that's how programs should be run.
So like as a hacker, I know the pain points of working on certain programs, right? So I try to make sure that those are accounted for in the program that I run. So I make sure that, account creation for hackers that want to jump in, it shouldn't take them 2 days to get up and hacking on the program, right? It needs to be well documented. They need to know what they're trying to achieve. And then I like to tell them about what we've built, right? There's nothing wrong with being transparent. So give them the full tech stack, tell them how we're running things, because that's going to save them time to hack quicker.
That's a huge, that's come up, I want to say, at both security and conferences from HackerOne, right? It's like just removing that friction between someone testing, because the times that people even have to go through your documentation to figure out how things work, that's time that they're taking away from actually testing your systems, right? So any opportunity that you can to remove that friction so that people are getting the highest ROI on their time and their effort, I think is massive, and something that the successful programs kind of have at the forefront of their mind.
That's definitely true. I've even taken a screenshot of the code before and sent it to a hacker. Just because it's like, here's the logic that's actually behind it. This is why what you're trying is not going to work. Just try to save them time. You get more value out of it. They get more value out of it. So,
what's the bug you're most proud of, and why? And at the same time, what's the one that got away? What's the most memorable system that you were sure was vulnerable and you just couldn't break it?
So HackerOne had this new functionality that you could export reports, right? And they had a vulnerability in it, and it ended up being their highest payout at the time, right? It was their first $10,000 five-figure bounty. And I remember thinking about that functionality coming out and thinking, yes, HackerOne, you can't mess that functionality up. They messed it up. But even better was they disclosed that report, and I was like, I'm not going to test this because how do you screw it up twice? And then there was another vulnerability in the same functionality that paid $12,000, and that was the biggest kick in the pants. Learning that it doesn't matter who the company is, right? Don't underestimate yourself or the potential to make mistakes, especially as people code quickly and there's a lot of pressures. That was a big one. In terms of the ones that I'm most proud of, probably the ones that kind of impact the most people or that are the most creative thinking, right? One of them happens to be the highest bounty that I got, but another one was the second bug that I found, and it was just creatively thinking outside of the box. And those ones for me are always the best, because you kind of think about how does this actually impact somebody, and then kind of make that case for a company and for them to validate and say, yeah, you're right, and here's some other things that are impactful as well that are associated with this. That's really cool.
The one for me that I'm most proud of is actually one I submitted to Shopify. Some people saying they had given somebody $20,000 for this super impactful bug, and that got publicly disclosed. So I looked at that, and I basically saw something else in there and tried to find a way to break the fix they have or find another way to achieve that impact. And it was pretty interesting because it's something that I've actually never seen anybody do in this way before. And it was just an idea I had. I didn't even know it was possible. It kind of opened up a new category of bugs for me, which was, I thought, pretty cool. And the one that got away, I think, is pretty much every bug I see at an event. Because events, you're all hacking on the same scope, right? You're all looking at the same thing. Everybody's starting at the same place. And afterwards, there's a show and tell where people get to present their bugs. And it's really interesting to see people present bugs that you completely overlooked. And you could have found it was there, but yeah, it was all that way.
Yeah, so for me, I would say the coolest bug I found was actually a couple months ago. So I was hacking against this large retail store in the US. I'm not going to name them, but I was hacking against them. And so I'm hacking against the site, and I found all these random PDFs. I'm like, oh, this is boring. I'm not getting anything here. But I actually took the time to read through the PDFs, and there was a link in the PDF. So I clicked it, and it took me over to this portal where I could upload videos. I'm like, what does this do? And recently, the store had started installing these huge TV walls in all of their retail stores. So I was able to upload videos that would control their TV walls in their US stores. So that was a pretty cool find.
Let's jump on from there. I noticed this app. There's a lot of great questions from the audience here, and I don't know if we're going to get to all of them. What are the top 5 security features that you would implement in a startup prior to launch?
Yeah, you can start.
I'll just say with you. I'm gonna start with super basic things that are really easy, like make your cookies HTTP only, stuff like that. Just really basic stuff that takes a minute to do and it just like adds an extra layer. Getting all your headers straight, like extra options, just super easy to do. C-strip tokens, a little more work to do, but that's really important. If you have any functionality for uploads, that's obviously where you want to spend most of your time on. There's so many RCEs that come from uploads. That's like the most common thing. Look at a list of dangerous functions. Are you running code through an exact function? Are you deserializing data that somebody put in? So try to hit some really high impact stuff like that. But at the same time, getting the low hanging fruit, it takes no time and it'll do something.
Yeah. So I would say startups usually out of the gate, right, are really eager to just start like signing up for random accounts and deploying things, and it's like slow down, use 2FA, make sure that your accounts are really well protected, right, because you don't want somebody to take over your startup on day one. And then from there, like really step back and think about the architecture that you're building out. Like don't just start throwing stuff up there trying to get something out the door. Think about it from day one, because that time that you spend on day one, like thinking it through, it's going to pay off 6 months down the road, a year down the road, right? You're not going to have to go back and re-architect things to meet different requirements for your customers.
So for example, in Shopify, we've patched Active Record to make sure that everything is scoped to a specific shop so that we've eliminated insecure direct object reference vulnerabilities. But GraphQL is the same way, right? It doesn't come with those levels of security. So I would think about that kind of right off the bat. The other thing is minimize the damage. So I would think, or what I've seen is a lot of startups, you want to log everything because you're building and you want to go back and have records in terms of what's going on. But you got to make sure that those logs are clean, right? Because if you get popped, the secrets and whatnot that are in there are just going to be a gold mine for people. And that's you got to think about PII that's in there as well, right? So it's looking at things holistically, and then if you have an environment, if you have one box that's popped, is your entire environment popped, or are you able to isolate those? So those are things that you might not necessarily have to implement right away, but if you give thought to it, you'll reduce that tech debt that you have to go back to a lot later. And regardless of your size, there's always a target on your back if you have any type of PII. So,
traditionally with a security approach, right, you send your hackers a list of IP addresses and server names and say, hey, go check for stuff that's not been patched. That doesn't work for us. So we've had to rethink how we want to structure our bounty program, because a traditional RCE might not really be that impactful. It sounds scary, but it's not. It's more business logic flaws, IDORs, things like that could really, we could lose customer data because of that. So those are the things that we're going to reward on and structure our program accordingly.
We've had reports that were, at least one, so we had a remote code execution that's our highest paid bounty, it's public. And it was as a result of somebody exploiting a server-side request forgery. And because we were in the cloud, they had access to a metadata endpoint, and then they pulled down their credentials. And as a result, they got access to the infrastructure, and with enough data, I'm sure they could have done a lot of damage. But that vulnerability wasn't a vulnerability if we were still on our bare metal servers, right? So the big thing, kind of going back to the other question, tying it back to that, should have also referenced is how wide are you making your threat landscape, right? So if you're going into the cloud, it's great. You reduce your tech debt and you can iterate quicker and deploy quicker. But at the same time, you've got to be cognizant of what landscape that opens up, right? There's going to be a whole other host of security considerations you have to look at. And then if you're using other people's libraries, it's the same thing, or third-party services. All of that you need to consider. How secure is the platform or the library that you're bringing into your application? Because it's your application that's going to be vulnerable.
I think misconfigurations are huge. There's a lot of vulnerabilities, like a misconfigured S3 bucket, for instance. Now they changed the UI so it's harder to do, and you could actually see your public buckets, but used to not be so obvious. And SSRX is another thing I think is huge, because that's very specific, where AWS allows you to pull metadata of the host, which could actually contain keys and stuff in it.
To that point, be patient. When you're looking at a complex system, and I remember I was guilty of this as a developer, right? You would look at the permission structure for, say, AWS, being I don't know what's going on here, and my permissions aren't working, so just give star dot everything, right? And then you have 10 developers that have star dot permissions on the entire platform. You're just asking for trouble. I would say be patient, invest that time, figure out what's going on. Security isn't just necessarily the hackers that are poking your system, right? But like credentials, infrastructure, trust from PII perspective, like privacy, like all of that is security. It's a massive umbrella. So if you're a startup, don't just think about the hacker that you can bring on that can necessarily poke at systems, but how do you kind of get to all of that?
Can you give any recommendations on how to structure a bounty program for a startup that has a limited budget?
So if you have a limited budget, but you have a cool product, I think something like giving subscriptions away for free or whatever the product or service is, I think you could play with that. I know GitHub had ran something at one point, which was if you found a bug within a certain time frame, you get free priority repos for life. And I mean, now it's free for everybody, but at the time it wasn't. And it was too cheap to pay $7 a month for something I use like occasionally, but so I was using Bitbucket. And then once I did that, I just switched all my stuff because it's like a cool word. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, like cash is still king.
Yeah, so get creative. Like Emek is a small company, right? So I had to get really creative. How are we going to reward these people and keep them coming back? So I recently designed these custom challenge coins for each severity level. So if a hacker, finds it critical, I send them this custom challenge coin, and then we are going to release new challenge coins every year. So people can earn these things on a continual basis and keep coming back to the program. The cost is minimal there, and then we give our bounty rewards on top of that for the big fines.
I think like the conversations that I've had, and it's kind of been echoed up here, right? Like money is obviously going to be a big factor, but at the same time, like you can pay a lot of money, and it takes you 6 months to pay everybody. You're going to lose interest. Or if you're not communicating with hackers, or you're not transparent, or you don't have a bounty table. If you have a limited budget, you've got to focus on kind of like every other aspect that is very important to a hacker, and I think you've got to do those extremely well. So when you get a report, don't wait days to respond to it, right? Even if you're looking at it internally, any type of communication that just says, hey, we've got this, thank you very much, like we're looking into it. At least at Shopify, we try to turn those reports around like within 12 hours, at least that same business day, and avoid like the fluff responses. Those tend to be contentious for hackers because it messes up the metrics. And so the metrics, on HackerOne, you can see like when the first response is, when triage is, and whatnot. So if you have the first response within the first hour, it frustrates them beyond belief, right? And we all talk about it. But those experiences on great programs are experiences that hackers share with each other. So if I get invited to a new private program that maybe the bounties aren't a lot, but I see that somebody spent a lot of time on that, and I know that person, I will reach out to them and say, what's your experience like with them? And if they say it's great and they recommend working on that program, I'll test the program, we'll go at it. That said, if it's a super hardened surface, and you've been running a bug bounty program for 6 months, you're not getting any reports, it's time to critically think about, like, do we want to up that payout? Because that's where you'll kind of keep people coming back. Cash is always going to be key.
Jesse, at Emek, you were dealing with quite a bit of regulation, and very specific regulation to the BHI. How do you see regulation like that evolving, specifically in healthcare, in the light of these hacker-powered programs, or vice versa?
Yeah, so compliance is hard, right? It doesn't matter how you look at it, it's challenging. So when you're developing your bug bounty program, you've got to make sure that you're structuring it to where it works with your internal policies, whatever compliance framework you're working with. There's certain disclosure requirements. If you have to be HIPAA compliant, or you're HITRA certified, whatever it may be. So make sure that you're structuring that bug bounty program where you can deliver on your requirements for that, and vice versa. It should be, an entire security program that you're looking at, not just a bug bounty program. And then hopefully in the future, more and more companies in the healthcare space will start creating these bug bounty programs. That's going to be really important going forward.
When you have a program like that, how does it, do you kind of upfront tell hackers, you can't touch other records? And then if they do, does that kick off problems for you in terms?
Yeah, so the way we kind of do it, we have a dev environment, right? And we keep all of our latest code there. So we let the hackers hack straight in the dev environment. And then we know if they found something there, it's most likely going to work in prod too. But that kind of limits that risk of them actually going in and finding patient data. So they're seeing test patient data. And then I give them test patient data as well that they can use while they're hacking. So that limits the risk quite a bit.
Next audience question up is wondering if you use any tools or software, dynamic or static analysis, to assist in your testing and hunting.
cross-site scripting in Rails is typically associated with like a function HTML safe, right? So if we see that in the code anywhere, like the security team's already automatically pinged. There's a few other functions that we add to that. So there's a laundry list that comes in from our continuous integration side of things. Those are probably the biggest automation tools that we use. I mean, our CI is all automated. We kind of reduce dev access to different boxes, and we do that through all automation so that you don't really have a reason to have to access a box, right? You can do it through like Slack and Slack bots. From a hacker's perspective, like Burp Suite's always going to be king. Burp Suite has like Active Scanner. I will freely admit that I will use Active Scanner on like specific parameters, right? So through the intruder tool, you can just identify one thing you want to actively scan. I'll do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. For me, I agree with that. My experience with static code analysis tools hasn't been great. For bounty stuff, most of it's black box testing, so you can't run any tools like that on it. But there are programs that are open source, and they probably already have, but you could actually go through and run any tools you want on that, and it's free money if it basically just pops up with a vuln right away.
Yeah, so from a program perspective, we have a really robust pipeline. We do static scans in that, which is important because we're running on Lambdas, right? Everything's just code. Before it ever gets to that point, one thing that I think is really critical that we do is if a developer or a team wants to write a new feature, right? They want to build something. We have them write up an RFC. So it's a one-page document that they just write up and they push it straight into Bitbucket or GitHub, right? And in the bottom of that, we have them do their own threat modeling. So they have to think about the security aspects of what they're building before they ever start writing code. So how can an attacker attack what I'm thinking about building? And so before they start writing, they've already got an idea of what not to do. And I think it's been really helpful in building like a secure product from day one.
It's very similar to Shopify. We have like a tech designs team that's got representation from like a variety of teams across Shopify, one of which is like security. And it happens to be our team lead who's involved in that. So as developers want to develop something that's kind of like new or new system or add significant functionality, we don't require them to, but they're strongly encouraged to submit a tech design document to that team. And they identify stakeholders, and then we get eyes on that. And if it's a new, we have like a tiered infrastructure. And so if you're going from like our development tier into like one of the others, there's a requirement for a security review, depending upon which, like each tier is more sensitive. So depending upon which tier you're going into, it's not necessarily automatic, but there is a requirement, and the security team goes and checks things out. And then we have like just a quick and dirty bash script that will automatically look at like easy things to screw up in Rails.
And it also helps too whenever your company scales really fast, right? If you bring on 30 new developers tomorrow, they just have to go back and read that document, right? To see what security features were approved and what worked in the past and how things were built. So it's very handy.
All right. Next up is a totally not leading question. How do you feel about the competitive nature of bug bounty as opposed to the collaborative benefit of team-based pen testing?
It's interesting. So we're just coming off of a HackerOne event where we're out with maybe 30 or 40 hackers. And I've had this conversation with a number of people, and it was kind of like, how did the event go? And one of the things that was best about this event, maybe 75% of the people that are there are people that have been at other events. And so I think when we first did the events, I can remember like not really talking to anybody. And you might talk to like maybe 2 or 3 people and kind of share the vulnerabilities that you found and whatnot. But then you fast forward to this event, and I don't know, maybe it's like event 10, 12, 15, whatever it is. But like day one, when everyone gets into town, it's all like, how many vulns do you have? And like, what are they? And everyone is transparent about that, right? Like everyone's talking about what they're finding and how they're finding it. And then you have people that are building off of that. And there's mutual respect when you do that, in that you end up sharing the bounty with other people. Or like, hey, did you think about this? Like Tanner had one where it was like, Tanner had a vulnerability, which we knew was a vulnerability. And then when he and I were talking about it, I was like, oh, I know that when you happen to do that, there's this auto-approve functionality. And so as a result, your vulnerability, like there's the impact for it, right? Whereas otherwise it was the company trying to determine what the impact was. So that's really cool. I can't say that I've been on the pen test side very long, but even then, like we were so busy that it just happened to be like one person just focusing in. It was very much like the bug bounty sitting at home where you're just working on an application by yourself. But that's where there's this broader community now like with a Slack channel, Twitter, where you can kind of reach out. Like I said, if I'm going after a new program, I'll reach out to those hackers that have been on there and I'll talk to them. And it's the same thing. If you see a big payout, people will ping me and say, hey, what did you find? And I'll more often than not be transparent because they're transparent with me, right? So when they get big bugs, I can say the same thing to them. And that, I mean, you're the only one sitting behind your computer screen, but it brings that community together.
So I'd say it actually is pretty collaborative. HackerOne is a great feature where you could add collaborators to a report and split the bounty with them. So you could work with 3 or 4 other people, and they had team events recently, which was teams of 4, so you kind of work together. So you kind of get, I guess, the best of both worlds with it. I've never done like traditional pen testing with a team attacking a certain target, but I assume that it's pretty similar to working with a team of 4 people and finding stuff.
Yeah, so I think for being hackers, we all kind of trust each other a lot. At these live events, it's almost like a hacker family reunion. I mean, people are really excited to get together, share what they've worked on. You know, they can work in sprints. So, like, what have you done the last 6 months? You know, and to catch up, and then just to bang ideas off of each other. It's awesome to see everybody and see what new tools they're using.
How do you cover your tracks after you've successfully hacked something?
I don't. I go out of my way not to, because I don't want my actions to be misconstrued, right? Like, all of my stuff, I want to be transparent. I want to be in the legal area, because like I said, I don't want knocks on my door. And I think that's even like when you look at people, they talk about it on Twitter, where they're testing companies that don't have a bug bounty program. Like, I'm not a lawyer, but under the CFAA, it's super broad. And so if you're using a computer that's not the way that it's intended to be used, there's the opportunity for someone to come knocking on your door. And so, like, I don't even want to be associated with potential testing that might have happened while, like, that villain is there, also trying to exploit that same system.
So I cover my tracks for other hackers. So here's what happens. A lot of times companies will have accounts that are shared between people. And if I'm hacking on something and I find something interesting and I do all this stuff, I'm going to go and delete those records afterwards. And just try not to, give away too much, because it is still like they beat me to the bounty after seeing what I'm doing, or say they're watching as I'm doing it, and they just submit a report first because they get an idea from it. Kind of sucks. So that's how I do.
Yeah, I definitely do that as well. Like, if you have shared accounts that you have to use,
I'll clean it up.
You find a vulnerability, you delete that record right away.
Yeah, so sometimes they have like dupe windows also, where it's like if you leave a vulnerability there, like an XSS pops up when you load, like they could report that and then the bounty will get split to you, which you definitely don't want.
Yeah, and I've actually I've been hacking and I found a vulnerability, but the only reason my vulnerability worked is because another hacker had been in that system and introduced a second vulnerability. So it never paid out because the first hacker found a different one. So yeah, it's kind of the shared account thing is tricky, but I think overall just being transparent, like with, is if you're hacking against somebody and you find something, let them know. Make your best effort to reach out to whoever it is, that company, and let them know that there's something going on.
Yeah, another thing, I had a time where I was able to get, able to get shell access on a box, and I saw that another hacker had been there before me because they created a file on the box, and that was disappointing. But it was,
Dan, I'm kind of curious. Most people don't do this full time, but you went all in for a year. What's it like in a day in the life of a full time bug bounty hunter?
well, no schedule, so I wake up at 1 or 2 p.m. every day. But the best part about it is that most of my good bugs they always happen to be at like 3 a.m. I don't know why, it just happens every single time. So the problem before is when you have a job to go to, it's like you start finding something interesting, you want to keep going with it, but you'll go to the clock and it's like, okay, I need to go to bed now. My technique hasn't really changed, but it definitely changed the way I approach in the sense of if I get a new invite or if I have plans for something and then an invite comes and says, oh, it's starting on this date, you kind of need to figure it out, because do you bail on your friends that you made plans with, or do you miss out on potentially a lot of money by going out instead? So it really prioritized, it changed the priority in my life a lot, which was good and bad. It was good because I was the first one to get things, because everybody else had jobs, but yeah, but it was bad because it would just come out of nowhere, and then it's like, okay, my entire week is changed.
So I was testing something on the site, and it was this really annoying site. We all had shared environment, and somebody had active scanned, and they had this JavaScript that ran, and so it had to load every record, and it was you couldn't do anything on the site. It most annoying thing. And so I was looking for a way to delete all the records through the UI. And so like I thought I found it, and I like click this, click that. I don't even remember. And then hit delete all, and like nothing deleted. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm moving on. And so the next day I was at work and I got an email. It was like, hey, you have a call? Like you have a moment for an urgent call? I was like, that's weird. And I was like, sure. Like what's up? And like you took down the production system. And I was like, there's no chance that was me. It's like, and they sent me a screenshot of like GitHub commit with my name on it. I was like, how does this even happen? And so yeah, that was interesting. Thankfully, they were understanding, and it was great that it came through the bug bounty program, not like somebody trying to do it maliciously. And I gave them like the perp logs, I gave them everything, and I told them like, everything was through your UI. Like there was nothing else. But that was probably the worst time that I had.
We're doing some testing, and I guess we're all maybe hitting it a little harder than we should. And then somebody who has never commented on our report before, somebody from the DoD had commented, like stop all testing immediately. And so I don't know what we took down, but obviously we should have done it.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've broken anything, but there's definitely been like unintended consequences. I was hacking against this program, or what I thought was a program, and I found these, on different IP addresses, I found these random portals that you could just go in and see these like video logs. The program I was hacking against, I was like, okay, maybe that they've got these in their network or something that I found, right? So I write up the report, and I'm like, okay, well, I can really get some cool information out of here. I can see what movies they've been watching, like all kinds of stuff. And I reported it to them, and their whole team kind of just like rallied around it to try to figure it out. And come to find out, it wasn't even for that program. Something in my ISP that I was testing off of got screwed up, and I was actually controlling the DVR boxes at local hospitals around the region. So totally random coincidence, right? So something was broken somewhere. It wasn't my fault, but yeah. So that kind of stuff creeps up every once in a while.
A lot of it's just on developers. Actually, like 2 weeks ago, I had one endpoint I hit, and it took down the entire database. And they commented, okay, what IP were you testing from? Because we see you took it down. And I just made one request, so. Developers.
All right, we're going to go on time pretty soon. Would you like to give us any parting words for folks out there who are thinking about how to work with folks like yourselves?
The fact that you're here is awesome, right? So go back and think about your security program, how you can make your company more secure, but yet find a way to like give back to the hacking community. So build some cool tools, open source those that protect you, and also share with us.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to start a program, look at things, or base things on impact. That's really important, instead of having a really strict scope. Because I found critical bugs that are technically out of the scope listing, but it's actually dumping, say, real data on an in-scope asset. And then if it gets closed and, oh, you're going out of scope or this is invalid, it's like, well, it has super high impact on you, so I think it should be treated as such.
Yeah, I think like being transparent, right? So if you're going to start a bug bounty program, don't start a bug bounty program where the policy is like, come test our systems. Like actually provide insight into like what's important to you. What is it that you're looking for? Like what are you going to pay, if anything? The more that you can kind of do up front to set expectations, I think the easier you'll have it. Because hackers will know kind of what that relationship is going to look like. You're going to know what that relationship is going to look like. And then just build off of that, right? So once you get that momentum, once you get people there, keep interacting with them. I had one company who gave me access to their staging environment, right? Like I submitted a couple of vulnerabilities, and they had pen test firms that had gone through and missed like all kinds of stuff. So I submitted after a handful of vulnerabilities. They actually found me like through LinkedIn, contacted me. This was before like the emails through HackerOne, but they contacted me that way, and they said like, here, you can have access to our staging environment. You can get access to new functionality, and just have at it. And then he allowed me to kind of go back and forth in terms of email, ask questions about their platform. Would they be interested in this type of issue versus that one? And then he ended up coming back and saying, I knew their platform better than some of their developers were, right? So that was awesome. And they were up for like a year, and they just kind of went dry with nobody hacking on them. But it was those types of things that got me going.
Help us out and give us direction is really good. What do you care about? That's the most important thing. Because a lot of companies care about different stuff, and you'll think something's pretty high impact, but they're just like, oh, we don't really care much about this because of these reasons. So tell us, oh, if you bypass this, this is like a critical bug. And then at least we know where to start, what you care about.
Yeah, and if you're trying to start a program from the beginning, you're probably thinking, well, what are hackers going to want to hack, right? Start small. So you can do something cool like, grab song lyrics, hide it in a file somewhere, and hide it in your product that nobody should be able to get to, right? And then challenge the hackers to go try to find that. And the first hacker that finds that, right, gets $5,000 or whatever it may be. You're gonna be blown away by the results that you're gonna get, and you're gonna see like holes in your application that you had no idea existed.
Jesse, Tanner, Pete, thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.